Okay, we've just been talking about the different properties of water, which is basically all based on the fact that oxygen is electronegative, forming a polar molecule, and how water molecules form hydrogen bonds with each other. So now we're going to look at some of the behaviors based on those properties, the behaviors of water that support life. So one of the behaviors is its cohesive behaviors. And so we can start with that term cohesion. And a lot of this should be review, hopefully. Cohesion, this is the H, which is hydrogen bonding between water molecules. And our abbreviations are there. And we can see that demonstrated here in the diagram. We're looking at xylem. Xylem is conducting waters, as you see over here, up through the roots and the stem and the leaves. And within the xylem, a sort of blow up of that shows two adjacent water molecules with a hydrogen bond in between and creates this whole chain effect. So we'll put a 1 next to that because that's what that demonstrates there. Because of cohesion, that gives water a characteristic called tensile strength, or basically a high degree of tensile strength. And tensile strength is the ability for a substance to withstand a certain amount of force or pressure before the structure of the actual molecular structure breaks apart. So in terms of water, the water column moving up through the xylem can withstand a high degree of tension or pressure, pulling it up out from evaporating from the leaves, and pulling that water column upwards before the water column will actually be under enough tension that it'll break. All right. Another behavior that's characteristic because of, or a result of cohesive behaviors, is adhesion. And adhesion is defined as hydrogen bonding between water molecules and other molecules, such as, in the case of xylem, cellulose. So in the diagram over here, we have that illustrated. Here we've got the cell wall of the xylem shown, of a vessel element, for example, and this bond here between a water molecule and the cellulose is demonstrating to us what is going on with adhesion. Now, the advantage of adhesion is that it helps sort of maintain the water column at the level where it keeps those water molecules at the from moving backward or moving down in the water column and continuing to move up. It also, because cellulose is hydrophilic, creates a wicking effect that helps to pull the water column up, and we refer to that as capillary rise. So adhesion facilitates capillary rise. Whoops, I'm writing adhesion. Capillary rise. Which is going to contribute, actually both of these characteristics for water, cohesion and adhesion, ultimately contribute to our transpiration. So we'll be talking about that more when we get to the topics, more details of transpiration. Another behavior of water based on these hydrogen bonding, its ability to form hydrogen bonds, is its ability to moderate temperature. Because of these hydrogen bonds, we say that water has high specific heat. And specific heat is defined as the amount of energy needed to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. Now, what does that mean in terms, well, let's look at the diagram over here. What we can kind of apply to large land masses is, here we have the Pacific Ocean. The water on the coastal areas next to the ocean has a high concentration of moisture. The air, rather, has a high concentration of moisture. And we compare that to just, a couple hours inland where there's a desert and the air is much drier. So in terms of temperature, we can see that the temperature on the coast is much more moderate than here in the desert, and that's because of the high concentration of moisture in the air. It requires so much more energy to raise that temperature by 1 degree. So if we have the same amount of energy coming in and basically from the sun, contacting surfaces in the desert, or warming air, contacting air molecules in the desert, as that energy coming into those coastal areas, the temperature, because the desert air is low in moisture, then the temperature is going to rise much more dramatically than we see at the coast. The coastal moist air helps to moderate, or helps to reduce fluctuations in temperature. And the same can be true if we compare temperatures from day versus night. We're not going to see a huge amount of change in temperature in the coast between day and night, but in the desert you could see a 30-degree drop in temperature at night. Now, what does this mean in terms of cell function? The temperature, so this is the sort of significance here for what we're talking about. Temperatures in cells are maintained at more of an optimal level, basically more stable, at levels that support chemical reactions, that prevent denaturation of proteins. So these are advantages for plant cells as well as any living cell. Also, a high degree of specific heat also translates into high heat of vaporization. And because water has a high heat of vaporization, again, it requires a high amount of energy in order for a phase change to occur between a liquid and gas. So for water to evaporate into vapor. And when there is enough energy that's put into a system where water becomes vapor, in terms of leaves, that high energy water that's now become vapor takes that energy away from the surface of the leaves through transpiration, leaving behind a cooler surface. This is the same concept associated with sweating in humans. The higher energy molecules that evaporate leave behind a cooler surface. So those are, in terms of plants, that's a very important, transpiration is an important function, not only for moving water around the plant, moving nutrients around the plant, but also for maintaining temperatures. The third behavior we want to look at here is water's ability to expand upon freezing. And so we're seeing here water in its liquid state, where the hydrogen bonds are constantly breaking and forming. They're not as strong as covalent bonds, and so if there's enough energy in the water, those bonds are going to constantly be forming and breaking, and that means those water molecules are going to be more clustered and tighter grouped together, or have a higher density. And then compared that to over on the left, where we have ice or frozen water, that's where these water molecules become fixed in position, and the distance between them is fixed by those hydrogen bonds. And so because they're more spread out, because all of them are now hydrogen bonded together, then ice has less density. Ice is less dense. How is that conducive to or supportive of life? It means life can exist below the surface of ice on ponds. If ice was more dense than liquid, then the whole pond would freeze. It would take forever for the pond to thaw, and very little would be able to live in a pond, basically. All right, and then the fourth behavior we're looking at is water as a versatile solvent. So here we're seeing sodium chloride as a salt that is basically an ionic bond between these two ions that's formed, but in an aqueous solution those ions dissociate, and so what we're looking at here is a positively charged sodium ion that is attracted to water molecules on the oxygen side, which remember has a partial negative charge, and then this negatively charged ion chloride is attracted to these positively charged ends of the water molecules where the hydrogens are. So those, what we're looking at, we can see a little bit less busy over here, are called hydration shells. And hydration shells are important in several ways. They, help transport hydrophilic substances through channel proteins that are in membranes. Here we have a protein that is, you can see, surrounded by water molecules. Different parts of the surface of the protein form hydrogen bonds with different ends of water molecules here. And again, that's a hydration shell, which is going to help stabilize the protein, help protect it from forming hydrogen bonds with other molecules that it's not supposed to basically bond with, so it would possibly interfere with its functioning. So from here we're going to move on into looking at water within cells and how different amounts of water will affect cell turgidity. So we're going to move into that in the next video clip, and then we would move from. Alright, so we have a little bit more time here with this little segment, so we're going to look at the next topic here, which is how water affects cell turgidity. Alright, so we already talked about how water helps to sort of create structure in plants by creating pressure inside of cells. And so one of the important things that we're going to be doing or looking at is looking at the measurement of pressure, which is called turgor, by the plasma membrane, and we'll abbreviate that PM, on the cell wall. And if there's a high degree of pressure on the cell wall, then we would say that that cell is turgid. When there's less pressure, then the plasma membrane is drawn away from the cell wall and it becomes more flaccid. And this is important for things like cell enlargement, basically a process of growth. For stomatal opening, when the plant opens its stomata and allows water vapor out or carbon dioxide in. And for transport in phloem, also important for phloem transport. And we'll be getting to all these things. And just in general, for mechanical stability, again, like that idea that it helps form a skeleton for the plant. You can see here that this plant is, what we call its cells are turgid. Its leaves are expanded. It's looking like its water status is optimal. Here we're looking at wilting, where the water where the water status is not optimal, and that's going to affect things like photosynthesis and other nutrient transport and other things. And then lastly, it's important